The water was already at his knees when Officer Ryan Cole heard it. Not screaming, not sirens. Something worse. A sound so raw and desperate, it stopped him cold in the middle of a flooded street at 2 a.m. A dog. Crying. And his K9 partner Rex was already pulling hard against the leash, barking once sharp and certain the way he only did when something was truly terribly wrong. Ryan had been a cop for 3 years. He thought he had seen everything. He had not even come close. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. And drop a comment telling us what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The storm had been building for 2 days before it finally broke. By the time Millhaven County issued the emergency flood warning at 11 that night, the Sycamore Creek tributary had already jumped its banks and was swallowing the lower east side of town whole. Dispatch had every available unit out. Roads were closing. Families were being pulled from cars stalled in rising water. The fire department had their hands full 3 blocks north. And Officer Ryan Cole, badge number 4417, was standing in the middle of Carteret Avenue with water rushing past his boots, a flashlight in one hand, and the leash of his K9 partner Rex in the other, trying to decide which direction needed him most. Dispatch, this is Cole. I've got Carteret and 5th fully submerged. Requesting direction. Over? The radio crackled. Cole, we've got a report of an elderly man unaccounted for on Dunmore Street. Can you move that way? Copy. Moving now. Rex walked beside him, steady and focused, the German Shepherd's broad shoulders cutting through the current without complaint. The dog was 4 years old, trained through the County K9 program, and in Ryan's opinion, the most reliable partner he had ever had in any context, human or otherwise. Rex did not panic. Rex did not second guess. Rex just worked, and right now Rex was working hard, his dark nose scanning the air constantly, his ears rotating like 2 small radar dishes. They made it half a block before Rex stopped. Not slowed down. Stopped. Completely. 4 paws planted, body rigid, head turned hard to the left toward the dark gap between 2 abandoned storefronts. Rex, heel. The dog did not move. Ryan tugged the leash once gently. Come on, buddy. We've got somewhere to be. Rex looked up at him, then looked back at the gap between the buildings. Then made a sound Ryan had heard maybe 3 times in 4 years of working together. Low, urgent, almost a whine, but not quite. The sound of a dog trying to communicate something he had no words for. Ryan stopped walking. He trained his flashlight into the gap. The beam caught water debris, a toppled trash can wedged against a brick wall. Nothing. He swept the light higher. Still nothing. He was about to move on when he heard it. Faint. Almost swallowed by the rain and the rush of water and the distant howl of wind. But there. Unmistakably there. A dog crying. Not barking, crying. The kind of sound that came from an animal in genuine distress. The kind that had nothing to do with aggression or territory, and everything to do with fear and pain, and something close to grief. Rex pulled again. Hard this time. Hard enough that Ryan had to widen his stance to hold position. Okay, Ryan said quietly. Okay, Rex. Show me. He unclipped the leash. Rex moved into the gap, like water finding its own level, fluid and certain, and Ryan followed, pushing through the space between the buildings, the walls on either side close enough to brush his shoulders. The water here was shallower, pooled rather than flowing, and the sound was getting louder with every step. Rex rounded the corner at the back of the building and stopped again, this time sitting down, which was his signal for a find. Ryan came around the corner and trained his flashlight forward. The old wooden pallet was pushed up against the back wall of the building, elevated maybe 8 inches above the water line by a concrete block underneath it. On that pallet, pressed into the corner where the 2 walls met, was a dog. She was a medium-sized mixed breed, mostly brown with a white patch across her chest, and she was soaking wet and shaking so hard Ryan could see it from 10 feet away. Her eyes caught the flashlight beam and went wide, and she pressed herself flatter against the wall, curling her body inward, And that was when Ryan realized she was not just frightened. She was protecting something. He lowered the flashlight slightly, angling it to see without blinding her, and he counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 puppies. Pressed against her belly, some of them crying in that thin, reedy way. Newborns cry. Some of them silent and still, in a way that tightened Ryan's chest immediately. "Oh no," he said softly. "Oh no. No, no." Rex made that sound again, the low, urgent one, and Ryan put a hand on the dog's back without looking away from the mother and her litter. The water was rising. He could see the line it had already made on the wall behind the pallet, a dark watermark, and the current level was already above that mark by 2 inches. The pallet was sitting on a single concrete block. If the water came up another 4 or 5 inches, it would cover the pallet entirely. Ryan got on his radio. "Dispatch, this is Cole. I'm behind the building at 412 Carteret. I have a situation. I need to know if animal control has any units working tonight." A pause. "Negative, Cole. Animal control is not activated for flood response. All units are human emergency only." "Copy that." He looked at the mother dog. She was still watching him, still shaking, still curled protectively around her puppies. One of the puppies at the edge of the group had stopped moving. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Dispatch, what is my priority order right now? The Dunmore Street call still active. Stand by." Another pause, longer this time. "Cole, Dunmore Street resolved. Neighbor located the gentleman. You are currently unassigned." Ryan exhaled slowly. "Copy. I'm going to be on foot on Carteret for a while. I'll check back in." He clipped the radio back to his vest and crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening the way he had learned to do with frightened animals and frightened people, because the body language was often the same. "Hey," he said very quietly. "Hey girl, I'm not going to hurt you, I promise." The mother dog growled, low and warning, barely audible over the rain. "I know," he said. "I get it. I'd growl too." Rex sat beside him perfectly still, not pressing forward, not making any sudden movement, just present. Ryan had seen Rex do this before, seen the way frightened animals sometimes responded to the dog's steadiness in a way they would not respond to a human. He waited. The mother dog's growl faded. She kept her eyes on Ryan, but the hackles along her spine lowered slightly. "Good girl," Ryan said. "Good girl. You are doing so good." He looked at the puppies again and did the count once more. 5. 3 of them were visibly moving, squirming against their mother's belly, seeking warmth. 1 was moving weakly, barely a small, struggling motion. And the 5th, the one at the edge, the one that had gone still. Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and found his secondary flashlight, the small one he kept as a backup, and clicked it on, directing it carefully at the still puppy without shining it in the mother's eyes. The puppy's sides were moving, just barely. The faintest rise and fall, but it was there. "Okay," Ryan breathed. "Okay, you're okay. All 5 of you are okay." But the water was not okay. The water had come up another inch, while he had been crouched there, and the concrete block underneath the pallet was now submerged deep enough that he could not see it anymore. He did the math in his head. The pallet was maybe an inch above the water surface now. Maybe less. He stood up and looked around the space behind the building. There was a rusted metal shelving unit on its side against the far wall, partially submerged. A stack of old wooden crates waterlogged and beginning to break apart. A loading dock platform to his right, elevated maybe 2 feet above the current water line, but solid concrete part of the building itself. He looked at the loading dock. He looked at the mother dog. He looked at the puppies. "Rex," he said. "Stay." Rex stayed. Ryan waded to the loading dock platform and tested it with both hands. Solid. Dry on the surface, which meant the water had not reached it yet and would not reach it for a while, not with that elevation. He came back to the mother dog and crouched down again. "Okay," he said. "Here is what I need you to understand. I know you don't trust me. I know I'm a stranger, and you're scared, and those are your babies, and every instinct you have is telling you to keep them right where they are. But that platform over there is dry, and this pallet is not going to be dry for much longer. So we need to move." The mother dog stared at him. He reached out his hand slowly, palm up, knuckles forward, the way you were supposed to do, and held it 12 inches from her nose. She flinched but did not bite. She sniffed the air. Her eyes cut to Rex, who was sitting quietly, and then back to Ryan. Ryan waited. The rain came down harder, and then so quietly he almost missed it. The mother dog stretched her neck forward and touched her nose to his knuckles. Just for a second. Just a brief cold press of a wet nose against his hand. But contact. "There you go," Ryan said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "There you go, girl." He reached in slowly, one hand, moving toward the puppy at the edge of the group, the still one, the one that needed help most. The mother's growl started again, low and rumbling, and Ryan froze completely. "I know," he said again. "I know. I'm sorry. But this one needs to be warmer, okay? This little one needs help." He moved his hand another inch. The growl continued. He moved another inch. And then the mother dog did something that stopped his breath entirely. She lifted her head, looked directly at him, and the growl faded. Just stopped. Like she had made a decision. Like something in her had shifted over from panic to a kind of desperate, exhausted trust. Ryan picked up the puppy. It was cold. Too cold. He tucked it inside his jacket against his uniform shirt against his chest, and felt the tiny body shudder. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on, little one." Behind him, Rex made a soft sound almost under his breath, and Ryan looked back to see the mother dog on her feet, nudging her remaining puppies, with her nose hurting them, doing what mothers did when they understood that staying still was no longer the safest choice. The water crept up another half-inch. Ryan moved. Ryan moved fast because the water was not going to wait for him. He got his hands under the pallet's edge and pulled it toward the loading dock, dragging it through 8 inches of cold, rushing water, while Rex positioned himself alongside the mother dog, not crowding her, just present, a steady, warm shape she could orient on. The mother dog followed. She did not hesitate. She kept her nose pointed at Ryan's jacket, at the place where her smallest puppy was pressed against his chest, and she followed, because that was where her baby was, and she would walk through anything to stay close. Ryan got the pallet against the dock wall. He lifted one corner and tilted it against the concrete lip of the platform, making a ramp. It was not elegant, it was barely functional, but it was something. "Come on," he said, looking at the mother dog. "You can do this. Come on, girl." She looked at the ramp. She looked at him. She looked at Rex. Rex sat down calmly at the base of the ramp and wagged his tail once, slow and deliberate, like he was saying something. The mother dog stepped onto the ramp. She slipped once on the wet wood, and Ryan's hand shot out to steady her flank without thinking, and she flinched, but did not snap. And then she was up on the loading dock surface, turning immediately to look back at her puppies, still huddled on the lower part of the pallet below. "I've got them," Ryan said. "I've got all of them, one at a time." He lifted the first puppy with both hands cupped carefully and placed it on the dock beside its mother. She was on it instantly, sniffing, licking her whole body, trembling with relief. Ryan went back for the second, then the third, the fourth, and each time he turned away to get another one, the mother dog made a sound in the back of her throat, a small, desperate sound, and each time he turned back with a puppy in his hands, the sound stopped. The one still tucked inside his jacket had not made a sound the entire time. Ryan straightened up on the loading dock and unzipped his jacket halfway. He looked down at the puppy against his chest. In the beam of his flashlight, he could see it clearly now, smaller than the others, maybe the runt. Its coat was a pale tan with a dark smudge across its left ear, and its eyes were still sealed shut, still too young to have opened. It was breathing. He could feel that the rise and fall against his palm. But it was not moving, not nursing, not doing any of the frantic squirming the others were doing now that they were reunited with their mother. He pulled off his right glove with his teeth and pressed 2 fingers gently against the puppy's side. Its heartbeat was there. Faint. Too faint. The skin felt cold in a way that went beyond just being wet in the rain. "You need a vet," Ryan said quietly to the small body against his chest. "You needed a vet an hour ago." He pulled out his phone. No signal. He had not had a signal since he turned onto Carteret. He tried his radio. "Dispatch Cole. I've got a situation that requires transport. I have a litter of newborn puppies, one in critical condition. Mother dog present. I'm on the loading dock at the rear of 412 Carteret. Can I get any vehicle access?" Static. Then, "Cole, all vehicle routes in your grid are compromised. Carteret to 3rd is impassable. We can't get anything to you for at minimum 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Ryan looked at the puppy. 40 minutes was not a number this animal could work with. "Copy," he said flatly. "I'll figure it out." He looked at Rex. Rex was standing at the edge of the loading dock, watching the water. His body language, that particular combination of alert and calm that Ryan had learned to read like a second language over 4 years of partnership. The dog was not alarmed, but the dog was paying attention. "What do you see?" Ryan asked. Rex glanced back at him and then looked north. Ryan followed the dog's gaze. Down the alley past the gap they had come through there was a light. Not a flashlight. Steadier than that. A window. Ground floor maybe 60 yards away, and it was lit. Somebody was still in one of these buildings. Ryan made a fast decision. He re-zipped his jacket around the puppy, tucked the mother dog's 4 surviving and moving puppies into a row along the inside of his jacket, against his left arm, which was physically awkward and barely possible, and completely undignified, and he looked at the mother dog. "I need you to come with me," he said. "And I know you're exhausted, and I know you're scared, and I'm going to need you to trust me one more time. Can you do that?" The mother dog looked at him with those wide, waterlogged eyes. Then she stood up. "Good girl," he said. "Rex, with me." They moved through the alley in a group. Ryan with 4 puppies stuffed inside his jacket arm, and a 5th against his chest, the mother dog staying within 2 feet of him at every step, Rex on his left side. The water was mid-shin now, and pushing harder than it had been 10 minutes ago. Ryan could feel the pressure of the current trying to move him sideways. He planted each step deliberately, methodically, the way you learn to move in floodwater when you had been trained right, which he had been. The light was coming from a laundromat. The sign above the door was dark, but through the plate glass window, Ryan could see the glow of the emergency lighting strips along the baseboards, the kind that ran on battery backup, and behind the counter moving a figure. He went to the door and knocked hard. Nothing. He knocked again, louder. "Police, open up. I need assistance." Movement behind the glass. Then a woman's face appeared peering out, and Ryan held up his badge with his free hand, the one not holding a row of puppies against his ribcage. The door opened 3 inches. A chain lock caught it there. "What is going on?" The woman was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back tight, wearing a long cardigan, and holding a broom handle like she intended to use it. "It is 2 o'clock in the morning. Ma'am, I am Officer Cole Millhaven, PD. I have a medical emergency. I have newborn puppies that need to be warmed immediately. One of them may not make it. I need towels, blankets, anything warm, and I need access to your building. Please." She stared at him for a long moment. At his badge. At his jacket, which was moving in multiple places from the puppies inside it. At Rex, standing in the water behind him. At the mother dog pressed against Ryan's leg. "Lord have mercy," she said, and the chain came off. Her name was Dorothy. She ran the laundromat with her husband, who was currently across town helping his sister sandbag her house. She had stayed because someone had to watch the machines and the building, and because Dorothy, as she made immediately clear, did not run from water. She was moving before Ryan finished explaining. She went to the industrial dryers and pulled out a stack of towels that customers had left clean and warm from the last cycle, and she spread them on the counter in a pile and said, "Put them here," in the tone of a woman who had raised children and was not asking twice. Ryan unzipped his jacket. The 4 puppies tumbled out onto the warm towels, and the mother dog was up on her hind legs against the counter before Ryan could say a word. Not aggressive, just desperate, pushing her nose into the pile, checking, sniffing, counting. "It's okay," Dorothy said to the dog, and her voice dropped to something completely different, soft and low and certain in a way that Ryan found unexpectedly moving. "It's okay, sweet girl. I see them. They're all right here." Ryan laid the fifth puppy down separately, a few inches apart from the others, and both he and Dorothy looked at it for a moment without speaking. The puppy's sides were moving, still moving. But the color of its gums, what little Ryan could see, was not the pink he needed to see. "Do you have a heating pad?" he asked. "I have a heat lamp in the back. I use it in winter for the plants my husband keeps insisting are going to survive in here." She was already moving toward the back room. "Give me 30 seconds." Ryan bent over the puppy. He rubbed it gently with a corner of warm towel friction and heat the way he had seen shown in a training video once years ago that he had never imagined needing. The puppy twitched. He rubbed harder circular motions along its sides, its belly, its legs. "Come on," he said under his breath. "Come on, you stubborn little thing." Rex pushed his nose against Ryan's elbow. "I know," Ryan said to the dog. "I know." Dorothy came back with a heat lamp on a long orange cord. She plugged it in and positioned it over the counter, and the warmth came down immediately, and Ryan could feel it on the back of his hands as he worked. Within 2 minutes, the puppy began to squirm. Within 4 minutes, it made a sound thin and wavering and completely extraordinary. And Ryan sat back on the stool Dorothy placed behind him and pressed one hand against his mouth and just breathed for a second. "There it is," Dorothy said quietly. "Yeah," Ryan managed. "There it is." The mother dog had arranged herself somehow, half on the counter and half leaning against it, which should not have been physically possible, but apparently was, and she had all 5 puppies nursing within 10 minutes. The counter of a coin laundromat at 2:15 in the morning, in the middle of a flood heat lamp, glowing a German shepherd sitting at attention on the floor, a 60-year-old woman putting on a kettle in the back room, because she said a person needed something hot after all of that, and a 25-year-old cop sitting on a stool with mud on his uniform, and something that might have been tears on his face if anyone had been looking carefully enough. His radio crackled. "Cole, we've got a report of a disturbance on Reed Avenue. Can you respond?" He looked at the mother dog. She looked back at him, and then she looked down at her puppies, and then she looked at him again. "Dispatch," he said slowly. "I'm going to need another unit to cover Reed. I'm currently occupied with an ongoing situation." A pause. "Copy that, Cole. What is the nature of the situation?" Ryan looked at Dorothy, who handed him a mug of something hot, and raised one eyebrow. He looked at Rex, who thumped his tail once on the floor. He looked at the 5 puppies, their sides rising and falling now in a warm, even rhythm. "Animal rescue," he said into the radio. "Active, ongoing. I'll update when I can." Static. Then from dispatch, a voice Ryan recognized as Sergeant Holt, who was not known for warmth or flexibility, or any emotional register above professional neutrality. "Copy that, Cole. Do what you need to do." Ryan set the radio down on the counter. He should have felt the situation settling. He should have felt the crisis easing, the immediate danger past, the adrenaline beginning to drain. And part of him did feel that. Part of him was watching those 5 puppies nurse and feeling something quiet and enormous and almost embarrassingly sentimental about the whole scene. But something else was happening in the back of his mind. Something that had been nagging at him since the moment he found the mother dog on that pallet. A question he had not had time to think about until right now. She was not a stray. He was sure of it. Her coat under the mud and the floodwater was well maintained. She was at a healthy weight or had been recently adjusted for the obvious strain of nursing a litter. She had a collar. He had noticed it when he carried her, a worn leather collar, dark red, no tags. But a collar. Someone owned this dog. Someone had a dog who just had puppies. And that dog was currently in a flooded back alley in the middle of the night, alone with newborns on a pallet, sitting on a concrete block. He looked at the collar again. He reached out and turned it slowly, checking the inside of the leather, and that was when he found it. Not a tag. A piece of electrical tape, the black kind, wrapped around the inside of the collar, and under the tape, pressed flat, a folded piece of paper, no bigger than a business card. Ryan peeled the tape back carefully, unfolded the paper. His flashlight was still in his hand, and he pointed it down at the paper and read what was written there. His expression did not change. He read it twice to make sure he was reading it right. Then he set the paper down very carefully on the counter, and he looked at Dorothy, who had seen his face change and was already leaning forward. "What is it?" she asked. Ryan picked up his radio again. His voice was completely level, completely controlled. The voice of a police officer doing exactly what he had been trained to do. "Dispatch, this is Cole. I need you to run a welfare check at 1140 Dunmore Street. Full welfare check. And I need backup sent to my location as soon as a unit is available." A beat. This just became something else entirely. Dorothy did not ask what was on the paper a second time. She read Ryan's face instead, the way older people learn to read faces when they have lived long enough to understand that the words people choose are often the least honest thing about them. What she saw in his expression made her step back from the counter and fold her hands in front of her and go very quiet, which was, Ryan was beginning to understand Dorothy's version of bracing for impact. He read the note a third time. The handwriting was small and uneven, pressed hard into the paper, like whoever wrote it had been pressing down with everything they had. "Her name is Sadie. She just had babies. Please take care of them. I can't anymore. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please tell my daughter I tried." That was all. No name. No address on the note itself. Just those 4 lines and the word "sorry" written twice, and a daughter somewhere who was about to receive news that Ryan had not yet figured out how to define. He folded the paper and put it in his breast pocket inside, close to him, the same pocket where the runt puppy had been warming against his chest 20 minutes ago. He did not know why he did that. He just did. "Dispatch confirm. Welfare check at 1140 Dunmore. How fast can we get eyes on that address?" The radio answer came back in under 10 seconds, which meant Sergeant Holt was already moving on it. "Unit 7 is 2 blocks out from Dunmore. We'll have eyes in 3 minutes. Stand by." 3 minutes had never felt so long. Ryan stood at the counter with his hands flat on either side of the warm towel pile, and he looked at Sadie. She was nursing her puppies with her eyes half closed, exhausted, in that total animal way that had no pretense in it. No performance, just a body doing what it was built to do after being pushed past every reasonable limit. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance. She was beautiful the way a person was beautiful when they refused to quit. "She put a note in the collar," Dorothy said finally. It was not a question. "Yes." "Was it bad?" Ryan did not answer immediately. He looked at Rex, who had placed his large head on the edge of the counter and was watching the puppies with an expression that Ryan could only describe as worried parental, which was medically impossible for a working dog, and yet here they were. "I don't know yet," he said. His radio crackled. "Cole, Unit 7 on scene at 1140 Dunmore. We've got a situation here." A pause. Officer Tran's voice, and Tran was not someone who used the word situation lightly. "We need EMS, and we need you." Ryan was already moving toward the door. He stopped. He turned back. He looked at Sadie and her puppies, and Dorothy standing there in her cardigan with the broom handle still within arm's reach. "I have to go," he said. "Can you stay with them?" Dorothy looked at him like he had said something faintly insulting. "Where exactly do you think I'm going to go? It's a flood." "I'll be back as soon as I can. If the runt stops nursing or stops moving, call this number." He pulled a card from his vest pocket and put it on the counter. "It'll ring my radio. Don't worry about protocol. Just call." "Go," Dorothy said. "Go do your job." He went. So, Rex moved beside him through the water without being told, the partnership so worn into both of them by now that thought and action had collapsed into a single motion. Ryan moved north on Carteret and then cut east toward Dunmore. The water fighting him the whole way, the current stronger on this block, the debris thicker. A plastic lawn chair spun past him. A child's bicycle. Things that had been ordinary an hour ago and were now just wreckage. Dunmore Street, 1140. A two-story house, white vinyl siding, a covered porch, the kind of house that would be unremarkable on any other night in any other context. Unit 7 was out front. Officer Tran standing at the base of the porch steps, talking into her radio. And when she saw Ryan coming, she ended the call and walked toward him fast. "What have we got?" Ryan said before she could start. "Elderly woman, late 70s. Name on the mailbox is Margaret Eloise Carver. She's conscious she's talking, but she took a fall and she cannot get up on her own, and she has been on the floor since approximately 10 o'clock tonight." Ryan felt the cold that had nothing to do with the water. 4 hours. At least. The neighbor 2 doors down heard something earlier and ignored it because of the storm. She called it in 20 minutes ago. Tran paused. "Ryan, there's a dog bed in the living room. Big one, and a bowl with the name Sadie on it." He stopped walking. "And there's a phone on the floor next to her," Tran continued. "She tried to call her daughter. The call dropped. She tried 3 more times. After that, she stopped trying, and she apparently spent the next 2 hours just talking to the dog." Ryan looked at Tran. "The dog wasn't there. I know. She knows. She keeps asking about the dog. It's the first thing she asked when I walked in." Tran's voice did not waver, but her jaw was tight. "She said she left the back door open a little so Sadie could get out to have the puppies in the yard. Said Sadie had been nesting for 2 days. She fell trying to go check on her." Ryan pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose for exactly 1 second. Then he dropped his hand and straightened his spine and walked up the porch steps. Margaret Eloise Carver was on the floor of her living room, propped against the couch with a throw blanket over her legs that Tran had placed there. She was small and sharp-eyed, and her silver hair was down around her shoulders because she had been ready for bed when it happened. There was a bruise forming along her left cheekbone, and her left wrist was cradled against her chest at an angle that made Ryan's teeth hurt to look at. But her eyes, when they found his, were completely clear. "Are you in charge?" she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Did you find her?" Ryan crouched down to her eye level. "Is her name Sadie Brown? White chest, wore a dark red collar." Margaret's face did something complicated. "Yes, that's her. Is she all right? Are the puppies all right? She was so close. I could hear her from the kitchen before I fell, and I thought she was fine. I thought she was handling it. She's such a good girl, but then I couldn't get up, and I couldn't get to the door, and I didn't know." Her voice cracked down the middle on the last word, like something that had been holding its shape through sheer will, and then simply could not anymore. "She's okay," Ryan said. He said it clearly and immediately, the way you did when a person needed one true thing to hold on to. "Sadie is okay. The puppies are okay. All 5 of them. I have them somewhere warm and safe, and somebody is watching over them right now." Margaret closed her eyes, just for a moment. Then she opened them again, and they were brighter than before in a way that had nothing to do with tears and everything to do with relief, which in the very old looks almost indistinguishable from grief. 5, she said softly. She had 5. She did. "She's been with me for 6 years, Margaret said. Since my husband passed. She came home with my daughter as a surprise because my daughter thought I needed something to take care of." A pause. "Turns out, I was the one being taken care of." Ryan had no answer for that. He had learned over 3 years of being inside people's worst moments that sometimes the right thing to say was absolutely nothing. So he said nothing, and he stayed at her eye level, and he waited. EMS arrived 8 minutes later, and the 2 medics confirmed what Ryan had suspected. Left wrist fracture probable. Possible hip involvement from the fall, which at her age meant hospital and evaluation, and a long, uncomfortable night regardless of how tough Margaret Eloise Carver clearly was. They stabilized her wrist and got her onto a gurney, and she did not complain once, not a single time, even when Ryan could see by her face that the wrist movement hurt her badly. What she did do as they were rolling her toward the door was grab Ryan's forearm with her good hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "The note," she said. Ryan went still. "Ma'am, in Sadie's collar. I put a note in her collar when I realized I couldn't get up, and I didn't know if anyone would find her in time. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I didn't know how long I was going to be on that floor, or if my daughter was going to answer her phone, or if the water was going to come in the house, and I just... She stopped. I needed someone who found Sadie to know she was loved, that someone wanted her to be taken care of, even if I wasn't there to do it. Ryan reached into his breast pocket. He took out the folded note and held it for a moment. Then he put it into Margaret's good hand and closed her fingers over it. I got that message, he said quietly, loud and clear. Her fingers tightened on the paper. One of the medics put a gentle hand on her shoulder, and she released Ryan's arm and let them take her. At the doorway, she turned her head back toward him. My daughter, she said. Her name is Caroline. She lives on the west side. She doesn't know any of this is happening. I'll find her, Ryan said. I'll find Caroline, I promise. The door closed. Tran was beside him almost immediately. You made a promise you don't know if you can keep. I know. West side is cut off. Roads are still flooded in 3 sectors. I know. Tran looked at him sidelong. You going to keep it anyway? Working on it. He turned to Rex. The dog was sitting at the base of the porch steps, with his ears forward watching Ryan with an expression that contained, if you were the kind of person who believed dogs had expressions, something very close to expectation. Like he was waiting to find out what came next. Like he already knew there was a next and was simply being patient about it. Ryan's radio fired. Different voice this time. Sergeant Holt direct. Cole, you need to hear this. We ran the address. 1140 Dunmore. There's a flag on that address in the system. Ryan frowned. What kind of flag? Wellness check history. 3 visits in the last 4 months. All called in by the same person. A pause. Called in by Margaret Carver herself, about her daughter. The cold came back, colder this time. What does that mean? Ryan said. It means, Holt said carefully, that the daughter you just promised to find has a history that is going to complicate your evening considerably. And it means that note in the dog's collar might mean something different than what you thought it meant. Ryan stood in the water on the porch of Margaret Carver's house at nearly 3 a.m. with Rex at his feet, and Tran watching him, and the rain still coming down, and the current still pushing against everything, and he read the note one more time in his head from memory. Please tell my daughter I tried. He had assumed those words belonged to Margaret. He had assumed she was the one who had written them. He had assumed the I in I can't anymore was a 70-something woman who had fallen in her own home and was trying to make sure her dog was safe. But the wellness checks were about the daughter. Not for the daughter. About her. Ryan looked at Holt's number on his radio display. Send me everything you have on Caroline Carver, he said. And get me a route to the west side, whatever route exists. I don't care what condition it's in. Rex stood up. Yeah, Ryan said to the dog. We're not done. The file on Caroline Carver came through in fragments the way everything came through on a night when the infrastructure of an entire county was underwater and holding together by the digital equivalent of duct tape. Ryan read it on his phone screen standing on Margaret's porch. Tran looking over his shoulder. Both of them quiet in the particular way that people went quiet when a picture began assembling itself from pieces that no individual piece had prepared them for. Caroline Marie Carver. 34 years old. 1 prior arrest. 18 months ago, possession charges reduced and eventually dropped. 3 calls placed by Margaret Carver to the non-emergency line over the past 4 months, all logged under welfare concern family member. The notes from those calls were brief and clinical. The way police notes always were, which meant they stripped out exactly the parts that told you what was actually happening between a mother and her daughter. But the word that appeared in all 3 was the same word, erratic. Ryan handed the phone back to Tran without comment and stepped off the porch into the water. Cole. Tran's voice was careful. You know what this might be. I know what it might be. If she's using going out there alone in the middle of a flood is not procedure. I know that too. Ryan. She only used his first name when she was genuinely concerned, Not professionally concerned, but actually concerned the way a person was concerned about another person they liked. "What's your plan?" He stopped walking and turned back. "My plan is to find Caroline Carver and tell her that her mother is on her way to Millhaven General with a broken wrist, and that her mother's dog just had 5 puppies in a flood, and that her mother wrote the word sorry twice on a piece of paper she folded up and hid in a dog collar because she was lying on her floor in the dark and she did not know if she was going to be okay." He paused. "That's my plan. Then I'll figure out the rest." Tran looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll cover the rest of Dunmore. Radio if you need backup." "Copy." Rex fell into step beside him and they moved west. The route Holt had given him was not a road in any conventional sense anymore. It was an elevated stretch of the old rail access path that ran behind the freight depot asphalt, slightly higher than the surrounding grid, which meant it was passable at roughly ankle depth instead of knee depth. Ryan moved along it with his flashlight forward, and Rex working the path ahead of him, clearing it the way the dog did with a combination of nose and instinct, and 4 years of training that had made him as reliable in chaos as anything Ryan had ever encountered. Caroline's last known address was a ground-floor apartment on Whitmore, which was 3 blocks into the west side. According to the file, she had lived there for 11 months. The file did not tell him whether she still lived there or who else might be there, or what he was going to find when he knocked on that door. Police files almost never told you the thing you actually needed to know. They told you the shape of a life from the outside and left the inside completely to your own interpretation. Rex stopped. Not the same stop as the alley. Faster. Sharper. The dog's whole body snapped to attention like a current had run through him, nose pointing hard to the right off the elevated path toward a lower section where the water was deeper and the darkness was thicker. "What is it?" Ryan said very low. Rex did not bark. He moved. Off the path into the deeper water, and Ryan went after him without hesitation because that was the agreement they had made 4 years ago, and neither of them had broken it yet. The water was thigh-high before Ryan found his footing on something solid, a submerged curb, and the flashlight caught what Rex had already found. A car. Civilian. A decade-old silver sedan nosed down in the lower section of an intersection clearly driven into the dip before the driver understood how deep the water was going to get. The engine was off. The headlights were off. But the interior light was on. Ryan came around the driver's side and put his flashlight to the window. A woman. 30-something dark hair slumped against the door with her forehead pressed to the glass and her phone in her hand. The screen lit a call that had dropped showing on the display. She was alive. He could see her breathing from outside the glass, the slight fog of breath against the cold window. But she was not moving, and the water outside the car was at door handle level and still climbing. He knocked hard on the window. "Police, wake up. Can you hear me?" Nothing. He knocked harder. Rex was circling the car, moving through the water, checking each side, doing exactly what he should be doing, what he had been trained to do. Ryan tried the door handle. Locked. He moved to the passenger side and tried that one. Also locked. He went back to the driver's window and knocked with his flashlight hard enough to make the glass vibrate, and this time the woman's head came up. Her eyes opened unfocused and slow, and she stared at the light without comprehension. For a second that felt much longer than a second, and then she pushed herself upright and her hands found the window crank, and she got it down 2 inches before it stuck. "Ma'am," Ryan said through the gap, "I need you to unlock the door. Can you unlock the door?" "What?" Her voice was thick and confused. Not scared yet. Confusion came first, then scared, and he needed to get her out before either one went too far in the wrong direction. "The lock. Pull it up. Right here." He tapped the door panel through the gap. Her hand moved to the lock. She pulled it. He had the door open in one motion, and the water that had been held back by the seal pushed in immediately around his legs, cold and insistent. And the woman made a startled sound and grabbed his arm. "The water," she said. I've got you. Come on. Can you stand?" She could stand barely. She was not injured, not physically, but she had that particular kind of unsteadiness that was not about the body and Ryan recognized it and filed it and kept moving, because right now, none of that mattered except getting her out of the car before the water made the decision for both of them. He got her up onto the elevated path with Rex pushing against her free side, the way the dog sometimes did with people who needed steadying a solid presence on the other flank. She stood there with water dripping from her jeans and her phone still in her hand, and looked at Ryan in the beam of his flashlight and said, "I was trying to call my mom." Ryan looked at her. He looked at her for 2 full seconds, which was longer than he should have needed. Then he said, "What is your name?" She blinked at him. "Caroline, Caroline Carver." Why? The world did not stop. Floods did not stop for coincidence, and neither did the rain, and neither did the water still rising around his boots. But something inside Ryan's chest did something that he could not name, some rearrangement of all the pieces of the last 2 hours, because the woman he had just pulled out of a car in a flooded intersection was exactly the woman he had been walking through a flood to find, and she had been trying to call the mother, who was right now on her way to a hospital because she had fallen, trying to go check on a dog who had just had puppies in an alley 2 miles east. "Caroline," he said carefully, "I have some things to tell you. Some of them are going to be hard to hear, but you're okay and your mother is okay, and we need to get somewhere safer than this before I tell you the rest." She stared at him. "My mother. What happened to my mother? Is she hurt? What happened?" "She's going to be okay. She's with EMS right now. She fell and she hurt her wrist and she's been on the floor for a few hours, but she's conscious and she's talking, and she is going to be okay. That part I need you to hear clearly." Caroline made a sound that was not quite a word. Her free hand came up and pressed flat against her sternum, against the center of her chest, like she was checking to make sure something was still working in there. "She called me," Caroline said. "Earlier. She called 4 times and I didn't pick up. I was driving over here because the calls kept dropping and I was going to go to her, and I drove into the water and I couldn't get the car out. And I've been sitting there for—" She stopped. "How long have I been sitting there?" "I don't know, long enough that the water came up to your door handles." "Oh God." She looked back at the car, the interior light still on the phone she had left on the seat still glowing. "Oh God, I have to go to her. I have to get to the hospital." "I know, and I'll get you there. But I need you to hear the rest of what I have to tell you first, because some of it involves you making some decisions, and I'd rather you make them with full information." She looked at him sharply. Something in the way he said it cut through the shock and the guilt and the adrenaline and landed. "What decisions?" Ryan reached into his breast pocket. He almost pulled out the note. Then he stopped, because the note had been written in fear and desperation, and was not the right entry point for what he actually needed to say. He put the note back. "Your mother's dog," he said. "Sadie. Do you know about the puppies?" Something moved across Caroline's face, something complicated and layered that he could not entirely read in the dark. "She told me last week. She said Sadie was going to have puppies any day. She had them tonight, during the flood. Your mother left the back door open so Sadie could get out to a safe place, and that's when she fell. She was trying to get to the dog." Caroline closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were wet, and Ryan could see her working to hold herself together, doing the kind of visible internal effort that people did when they were scared and guilty and exhausted all at the same time, and none of those feelings were willing to wait their turn. "Are they okay?" she asked. "The puppies. All 5 of them. I found them about 2 hours ago in the alley behind Carteret. Your mom had put a note in Sadie's collar." He paused. "I thought the note was from your mother, when I first read it." Caroline went very still. "It said she couldn't anymore." Ryan continued watching her face. "It said to please take care of the puppies. It said to tell her daughter she tried." Caroline's mouth opened slightly. No sound came out. "I ran the welfare check history on your mother's address," Ryan said, "and I saw that all 3 of the recent calls were concern calls. About you. Not from you." The silence between them was the kind that had weight. That pushed back if you leaned into it. "I wrote that note," Caroline said. Her voice was barely above the sound of the rain. 3 weeks ago, Mom asked me to check on Sadie one day when she had a doctor's appointment. I was at the house and I was having a bad day. One of those days where everything feels like too much, and I wrote it because I was scared of myself, and I didn't know what to do with that, and I thought if something happened to me, I wanted someone to find it and know that she had people. That Sadie had people. She stopped. I put it in the collar because I knew Mom would never look there, but anyone who found Sadie would check the collar. It was the safest place I could think of. Ryan breathed in slowly through his nose. "I've been trying," Caroline said, and now the voice broke clean and sudden, the way things broke when they had been held together too long. "I've been trying for 8 months. I go to meetings, I have a sponsor. I call my mom every day, or almost every day, and tonight I didn't answer because I was already scared about the storm, and I was already in my head, and when she called 4 times I panicked instead of picking up, and I have been sitting in that car for an hour trying to get myself together enough to call her back." Rex moved to her. Slowly, without command, the way he sometimes did, positioning himself close enough that his shoulder was against her leg. She looked down at the dog, and something in her face changed. Some of the rigid holding-on quality gave way into something more real, more human, more the size of what she was actually feeling. "He does that," Ryan said quietly. "He's warm," she said, and she was crying now, not dramatically, just steadily, the way rain was steady. "I'm sorry. I don't even know you." "You don't have to know me." Ryan looked at her, this woman he had found by accident in a flooded street at 3 in the morning, at the end of the strangest night of his professional life. "Your mother loves you. She has called the police 3 times in 4 months, because she is scared for you, and she fell on her kitchen floor tonight, and lay there for 4 hours, and the thing she talked to Tran about when we got to her was the dog. Not herself, not her wrist, the dog, and you. In that order." He paused. "That is not what giving up on someone looks like." Caroline pressed the back of her hand against her mouth, held it there for a moment. "I need to get to her," she said finally. "I know, and we're going to make that happen." He got on his radio. "Dispatch Cole. I have a civilian on the elevated path behind the freight depot needs transport to Millhaven General. Can we get a vehicle to the Whitmore end of the access path?" Holt came back in 30 seconds. 10 minutes, Cole. We've got a unit on the way." 10 minutes. Ryan clicked off the radio and stood with Caroline Carver on an elevated path in the middle of a flood, while Rex leaned against her leg and she cried quietly. And he let her, because sometimes the most useful thing a person in authority could do was absolutely nothing at all. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Dorothy's landline routed through the station because Dorothy apparently still had a landline, which was the most Dorothy thing he could have imagined. One word. "Come." Ryan looked at the message. He looked at Caroline. He looked at the direction of Carteret 2 miles east, where 5 puppies and 1 exhausted mother dog and 1 60-year-old woman with a broom handle were waiting in a coin laundromat. He looked at Rex. "We're not done yet," he said. And he was not sure anymore if he was saying it to the dog or to himself or to the night in general, which had turned out to have considerably more to say than he had expected when he walked out of the precinct 8 hours ago. The unit that came for Caroline was Officer Mendez, who took one look at the situation and asked 0 questions, which Ryan appreciated more than he could say. He put Caroline in the back of the vehicle, told Mendez to take her directly to Millhaven General, and to personally walk her to the floor, where Margaret Carver was being treated. And he stood in the water and watched the vehicle's taillights until they disappeared around the corner. Then he turned east and started moving. Rex matched his pace without instruction, reading the shift in Ryan's body the way the dog always did, the slight forward lean that meant urgency, the set of the jaw that meant something was unresolved. They moved together back along the access path and down onto Carteret, and the laundromat light was still on from a block away, warm and steady against the dark. And Ryan felt something in his chest ease by 1 degree at the sight of it. He pushed through the door. Dorothy was standing behind the counter with her arms crossed, and her expression arranged in the particular combination of worried and irritated that reminded Ryan so sharply of his own grandmother that he almost stopped walking. "She's not nursing," Dorothy said before he got both feet through the door. "The little one, the runt." She nursed for 20 minutes, and then she stopped, and I can't get her back on, and I didn't want to move her wrong, so I called you." Ryan was at the counter in 4 steps. The puppies were still in the towel pile under the heat lamp, 4 of them squirming and nursing fat and warm, and completely indifferent to the crisis of the evening. The runt was at the edge, separate now, her small sides moving, but her mouth not working. Her head tilted at an angle that looked like effort was happening, but nothing was coming from it. Ryan picked her up. She was warmer than she had been in the alley, much warmer, which was something, but she was limp in his hands in a way that the others were not. That boneless quality that meant a body was using everything it had just to keep running, and had nothing left for anything else. Sadie lifted her head immediately and made the sound, that low, urgent mother sound, and Ryan held the puppy close to her nose and let her sniff, let her make the contact, let her know where her smallest one was. "I know," he said to Sadie. "I know. I'm not taking her away. I'm right here." He looked at Dorothy. "Do you have an eyedropper? Anything like that? I have a kitchen in the back." She was already moving. "My husband keeps supplies for the stray cats he's not supposed to be feeding. Give me 2 minutes." She was back in 90 seconds with a small plastic dropper and a container of evaporated milk that she said had been in the cabinet since at least the previous winter, and Ryan looked at it and decided that the previous winter was recent enough for a puppy fighting this hard to stay alive. He warmed a small amount between his palms, tested the temperature on his wrist, the way you did with anything for something too small to tell you if it hurt, and then he touched the dropper to the puppy's mouth, just the tip. Just a suggestion of warmth and food at the edge of her lips. Nothing. Then a flicker. The smallest possible movement of the tongue. "There you are," Ryan said under his breath. "There you are." He gave her 1 drop. Waited. Gave her another. The tongue moved again, more deliberately this time, and Rex made a sound from the floor, a single exhale through his nose, and Dorothy put both hands on the counter edge and leaned in and said nothing at all, which was the most useful thing she could have done. It took 11 minutes. 11 minutes of 1 drop at a time of patience that Ryan had to work for, because patience did not come naturally to him at 4 in the morning after the night he had just had. But at the end of 11 minutes, the puppy was nursing from the dropper with enough conviction that he could feel the pull of it, and her legs were moving, and when he placed her back against Sadie's belly, she found what she was looking for and latched on, and Sadie put her chin down on the edge of the towel pile and exhaled a breath so long and so complete that Ryan felt it in his own lungs. Dorothy put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were bright. "Don't," Ryan said without looking up. "I'm not doing anything," she said, her voice entirely steady and completely unconvincing. Rex walked to the counter and placed his chin on the edge beside Sadie's head, and the 2 animals regarded each other from a distance of approximately 6 inches, and Ryan watched them and felt the specific emotional exhaustion of a person who has been moved past the point of being able to pretend they are not moved. His radio crackled. Tran. "Cole. Hospital just called the station. Margaret Carver is stable. Wrist fracture confirmed, no hip involvement. She's asking about the dog." Ryan laughed. It came out short and rough and mostly involuntary. "Tell her the dog is fine. Tell her all 5 puppies are fine." He paused. "Tell her Caroline is on her way." A beat. Then Tran said, "Caroline showed up. Found her in a flooded car on Whitmore. Long story." "Of course it is." Another pause. "Cole, are you okay?" He looked at Sadie. He looked at the 5 puppies, the runt among them, now small and insistent, and apparently not finished after all. He looked at Rex, still with his chin on the counter, keeping company. "Yeah," he said. "I'm good." He was not entirely sure that was true, but it was true enough for the radio. The water outside began to recede around 5 in the morning. It happened the way floods always retreated, grudgingly and unevenly, leaving behind the evidence of everywhere it had been. Ryan knew because he checked twice, stepping to the door and looking out with his flashlight, watching the waterline drop against the curb across the street. By 6, there was sidewalk visible. By 6:30, the lowest sections of Carteret were passable on foot without waiting. Dorothy made more coffee. Ryan drank 2 cups standing up without tasting either one. Rex slept for 45 minutes on the floor with his nose pointed at the counter where Sadie and the puppies were, and Ryan watched the dog sleep and thought about nothing in particular for the first time in hours. His phone rang at 7:12. Number he did not recognize. He answered. "Is this Officer Cole?" A woman's voice, young, rough around the edges, in the way voices were rough when someone had been crying for a long time and had only recently stopped. "This is Cole. This is Caroline Carver. I'm at the hospital. I'm with my mom." A pause. "She's sleeping right now." They gave her something for the pain. But before she went out, she kept asking me to call the officer who found Sadie. She said she needed to know the puppies were really okay. She said she didn't believe the radio message. She said she needed to hear it from you directly, because you were the one who was there. Ryan looked at the counter, at Sadie with her 5 puppies lined up against her. The runt in the middle now positioned by Ryan's hands, so she had easier access, no longer at the edge, no longer cold, no longer fighting for what she needed. Just there, part of the group, safe in the way that safety looked when it had been genuinely uncertain not long ago. "They're okay," he said. "All 5 of them. Sadie is okay. She's warm and she's fed and she's doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing." He paused. "You can tell your mother that from me. You can tell her I was there when the little one started nursing again at 4 in the morning, and that she is stubborn in a way that I have a lot of respect for." A long silence on the line. Then Caroline said, "She's going to want to know about the note. My mom. She's going to ask about it." "I know. Did you read it the whole thing?" "I did." "Then you know it was me, not her." "I know that." Another silence. Harder this time, the kind that had something waiting inside it. "Are you going to report it officially?" Ryan took a breath. He understood the question and everything behind it. The file on Caroline. The wellness checks. The fear that a moment of crisis 3 weeks ago, written on a small piece of paper and tucked inside a dog collar, was going to become something official that followed her into a future she was apparently trying very hard to build. "Caroline," he said carefully, "that note was found on a dog in a flood. It contained information about the dog's owner and a request that the dog be cared for. That is what I documented." A beat. "The rest is a conversation between you and your mother and whatever support you have in place. It is not mine to document." The sound she made was barely audible. He felt it anyway. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know how to." "You don't have to," he said. "Take care of your mother. That's all." He hung up and stood there for a moment with the phone in his hand, and the morning light beginning to come through the laundromat window, and Dorothy behind him quietly washing out the coffee mugs, creating the small domestic sound of a normal morning that had no business existing at the end of the night they had all just shared. The last thing that happened was small enough that it almost did not register. Ryan was preparing to arrange transport for Sadie and the puppies, working out in his head how to move a nursing mother dog and 5 newborns without distressing anyone involved, when Sadie lifted her head from the towel pile and looked directly at him. Not at the door, not at Rex, at Ryan. She held the look for a full 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, she was not a frightened animal on a pallet in an alley, and she was not a dog in crisis. She was just a mother who had done what she had to do and was now looking at the person who had helped and communicating the only way she knew how. Direct and quiet and entirely without ambiguity. Rex raised his head from the floor and looked at Ryan too. Ryan stood in a coin laundromat in the early morning after the longest night of his 3 years on the force, with mud drying on his uniform and coffee going cold in his hand. And he looked back at both of them and understood clearly and completely that there were things this job gave you, that no training prepared you for, things that did not fit into any report or any log or any officially documented outcome, things that just happened, things that stayed. He set down the coffee cup. He straightened his badge on his chest. He looked at Dorothy, who looked back at him with the expression of a woman who had seen what she needed to see and was satisfied with it. "Let's get them home," Ryan said. And they did.